Imagine you're trapped in Nazi Europe in World War II. You might be a captured soldier or a bomber pilot who's been shot down or a refugee. Your survival now depends on your ability to escape. But how do you evade capture in unknown terrain?
Somebody yelled out Germans, and we were absolutely frozen stiff. 50% fear and 50% cold.
Tens of thousands of men and women staked their lives following routes that became known as the Freedom Trails.
That's freedom up there. You're not quite home yet. These routes through enemy territory led to safety, but many were extremely perilous.
Si è rischiato tantissimo. Dal primo fino all'ultimo non ne lasciavano uno.
To find them required the help of local resistance fighters who risked their own lives to save others.
Un italiano con che salvava gli inglesi veniva fucilato solo istante.
I want to retrace these routes that have since become legendary.
Now we're in the mountains proper.
Discover what it took to escape.
Pretty claustrophobic space.
And meet the ordinary men and women who became heroes in the process.
You helped me to safety. You're a wonderful, wonderful person.
This time I'm in Slovenia.
This Freedom Trail follows the route of an extraordinary story. This was the largest successful mass escape of Allied prisoners in the Second World War, and almost no one knows about it.
I start my journey in northern Slovenia, which was a territory of the former Yugoslavia. On the 6th of April 1941, Hitler invaded the country, and it came under fascist occupation. He then arrived in the city of Maribor to stake his claim.
It was here, in the main square at Maribor, where Hitler paid his only visit to Yugoslavia. He wanted Maribor because of its strategic significance. It was very close to the border with Austria. Make these lands German again, he declared, and marched in unopposed with his troops in April 1941.
On the outskirts of Maribor, the Germans established a military prison camp, Stalag 18D. More than 4,000 British and Commonwealth prisoners of war were crowded into this camp. They were forced to labour on roads and railways, relentless, back-breaking work. Private Ralph Churches was a popular and charismatic Australian, captured by the Germans during the battle for Greece in 1941. He'd been in prison for 3 years and was desperate to get out. He couldn't have suspected he was about to lead one of the most remarkable escapes of the entire war.
I'm particularly looking forward to this because I'm about to meet Ralph's son, Neil, who's flown in all the way from Australia. Hello, Neil. How are you?
Not too bad. Yourself, mate?
Good, very good, very good.
Good.
Quintessential Australian greeting. Good,
Oh, well, yeah.
G'day, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. Got to keep in character for you.
Neil's father, Ralph, was prepared to risk his life to defy the Germans.
Dad hated everything that Hitler stood for. He was fairly political in that regard. And so being here and being content in the prison camp, Hitler won. And he wasn't going to let that happen for him or to him.
Yeah.
Stalag 18D also held Soviet prisoners. Unlike the captured Allies, they were kept in barbaric conditions, and Ralph witnessed the inhuman cruelty of the Nazi regime firsthand.
Dad told me lots of bad stories about this building.
I'm sure. It has sort of a real ominous feel about it, doesn't it?
This was the place that you didn't want to come to because as a British prisoner, you only came here as a punishment detail to pull dead Russians out and bury them.
The stench as that door was opened of 5,000 bodies with totally inadequate kind of hygiene.
Dad said basically he vomited every time he opened the door and came in. Oh, wow. A place of hell.
Yeah.
Filled with very hungry, angry ghosts.
Yes, true.
These were fathers, they were sons, they were husbands, they were normal people.
The horror of what happened here creates a very, very strange sensation when you walk through the door.
Yeah.
You know, without a doubt.
It just feels awful.
Yeah. Yeah. Come on, shall I...
Get out of here?
Yeah, exactly. I think that Ralph was driven to escape, and he always had it at the forefront of his mind. What he saw here scarred him for life and really lit the blue touch paper to make Ralph initiate the escape.
But how? And who would help him? Hitler's objective for this region was to wipe out the ethnic Slovenian culture and deport or kill anyone who opposed him. But they reacted by turning themselves into one of the most effective resistance movements anywhere in occupied Europe. The partisans were fighting back. People like Jose Duše.
Nas v partizani prvič, da osvobodimo domovino od sovražnika, pa da onemogočimo tudi tem domačim izdajalcem, da bi še naprej delali svinjarijo za slovenski narod.
Vedeli so, da se borijo za svojo domovino, za svoja življenja, za svoja ognjišča, tam, kjer so že stoletja in stoletja prebivali.
Ralph came up with a daring plan. He would find a way to contact Slovenia's partisans. Ralph was one of an 80-strong working party of British, Australian and New Zealand POWs. They travelled every day to labour on the railway line at Ožbalt, a short train ride west of the camp. It was his mate and fellow prisoner, British private Les Laws, who provided the solution.
Les was a pivotal part of the plan. He'd been given the responsibility of collecting water from a local farmhouse, and he used that contact to get in touch with the partisans.
For months, they worked on an escape plan, and it finally came together here at Ožbalt on the 30th of August, 1944.
Ralph had had a few days' notice from the partisan contact through Les, and he knew that the escape was on.
Ralph, Les and 5 others pretended to go for toilet breaks. As soon as they were out of sight, they made a run for it and fled into the depths of the forest. The partisans were waiting to lead them away. After 3 years of incarceration, they were free. It must have felt incredible. But the real challenge had only just begun: how to stay alive and get to safety. Ralph and the men were still in Nazi-occupied territory. There were small pockets of freedom in towns where the partisans were in control, but true freedom lay over 150 miles away, near the border with Croatia, across densely forested, inhospitable terrain that was crawling with German patrols. Ralph and the others' first move was to the nearby town of Laurenz. This was a partisan stronghold which had just been liberated.
Cheers. Good health. Here's the question. He'd made it. He'd come here. He was free. But if he was caught, he'd be executed. And yet, that night, he decided to go back.
Ralph knew he couldn't go any further without rescuing the rest of his fellow prisoners.
What possessed him to hatch probably the most audacious plot, almost in the history of escapes in the Second World War?
Somebody asked him why he did it. He said, well, look, basically, if you know you've got the opportunity to do the right thing and you choose not to do it, it's going to hammer you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Cheers. Yeah.
An escape of this scale would bring enormous kudos to the partisans, as well as humiliating the Germans, so the partisan commanders agreed. At dawn, Ralph, Les and a full battalion of 100 well-armed partisans would return to Ožbalt. They needed to be in position before the arrival of the working party at 8 a.m.
Reševanje pri Ožbaltu je bila moja prva akcija, reševanje angliških ujetnikov.
So, Neil, this was pretty much the point.
Yeah.
Physically, and the moment in time when the working party got here, that a normal working day suddenly changed dramatically.
Yes.
What happened?
Partisans leapt up from all of these trees around here, yelling, screaming, pointing guns. Then Dad says, "Come on, you bastards, come on, you bastards, up the hill, we're away, come on, come on, come on."
Good Australian term of encouragement there, yeah.
Ker so oni to prvič doživeli in tak šok praktično je bil tudi za ujetnike praktično, veste.
Suddenly there must have been this horrendous shock because you get here, you just got to pick up your tools and then BAM! All hell breaks loose. Because these guys, these ferocious looking guys.
Yeah, and Dad said all of the prisoners were just standing there with their tools in their hands, sort of staring up going, what the hell?
Meni se zdi, da njim je že bilo tudi te vojne vrh glave, tako da tu so se kar tresli, veste. Strah jih je bilo. Mi pobiramo orožje, pa smo šli.
A huge group were marched up the hill by their partisan liberators.
Good effort, mate. Well done. Well done.
Speed was crucial.
A man possessed.
They knew that the alarm would soon be raised and German patrols would be hunting them down. Capture would mean severe punishment and often death for all those involved. Ralph had everyone's life in his hands.
This was just tragic,
This is just slog.
Brutally hard work by guys wearing the wrong kit who physically
We're not prepared.
not prepared.
They were crossing tough terrain to evade capture, travelling along secret corridors known only to the partisans and heading for an undisclosed destination. Hidden trails like this crisscross the whole of Nazi-occupied Europe.
The thing with walking in Dad's footsteps is there's no escaping the enormous shadow that he throws across this landscape. It's just getting steeper.
It is. I guess it's remembering whose footsteps you follow, isn't it?
Well, that's the only thing that's keeping me going.
You got good genes. And I don't mean the ones you're wearing.
It's been a long journey of getting to understand Dad, because he was a very complex, very proud and difficult man.
The group were in shock. Most hadn't chosen to escape, so it fell to Ralph to keep them all going.
That's what
Caught
took
you
me
out.
there.
The escapees had the threat of capture hanging over them the whole time. They had no idea where they were going or if they'd make it alive.
If your dad was standing there in front of you now, what would you say to him?
Well, you know, I'd ask for a hand.
Yeah.
I feel a lot closer to Dad in terms of knowing exactly what he had to go through, including motivating guys to follow him up these hills. Oh, wow.
Now that is a vista, isn't it?
This is where Neil and I part company as I continue on the next leg of the journey.
So, Neil, what are your thoughts? End of today.
Well, I'm knackered and I'm proud. It's a spectacular way to end the day. Very happy.
Well, mate, I've got to head off. I'm carrying on the route. You've been great company. It's been tremendous to meet you, Neil. And
Thanks,
it's been
buddy.
a real
Good to
pleasure.
meet you. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, good luck.
Take care.
Cheers. Bye.
The escapees had begun by covering an incredible 14 miles in the first 4 hours. But with German patrols hot on their trail, there was no going back. I'm in Slovenia, retracing the route of the largest successful escape of Allied prisoners during the Second World War. Led by Ralph Churches, a group of nearly 100 escapees were trying to flee to the border with Croatia, a journey of more than 150 miles through Nazi-occupied territory. So far, they'd marched just 14 miles, deep into the forests.
This is a fair representation of what the group went through. It wasn't all neatly marked trails. It was stuff like this, really hard going, and very, very difficult to move through. And these weren't experienced trekkers. They were exhausted, very frightened a lot of the time, and they had no idea where they were going as well, you know, what the end destination was.
Ralph and the men were in the hands of partisans, ordinary Slovenians who'd banded together to resist the Nazi occupation. The partisans' local knowledge was the only possible way to evade German patrols.
The weather in the mountains can change in an instant, and this freezing fog's just come in from nowhere, really. And it's reduced visibility to almost nothing. And one of the problems the partisans faced was, for a lot of the trek, the men had to walk in single file. And sometimes the whole snake, the line of men, extended for 1.5 kilometers. And they could have lost any of them at any time. So it was a huge logistical and navigation challenge for the partisans to keep that line of men together and make sure none of them got lost in rapidly changing conditions.
At the end of the first day of relentless trekking, the escapees needed to stop and rest. But where and when was a difficult decision.
The prisoners didn't have camping gear, they didn't have anything with them. So they relied really heavily on either cover in barns and farm buildings, or they just slept out in the open. The prisoners were really frightened of the bears and wolves and lynxes in the wood, and they had no experience of environments like this at all. Interestingly, the brown bear here, 70–80% of its diet is nuts and berries. It's plants, basically. And all you got to do is just make sure you're not part of the 20% that isn't. It's quite primal, I think, getting a fire going. The woods here are proper ancient forests. There's a danger of thinking that this was just a bit of a romp across the countryside, a great adventure. But of course it wasn't. The stakes were incredibly high, and the stresses on them incredibly intense. And this is a copy of Ralph Church's book. This is an incident that happened with one of the partisans. He said he bitterly regretted having left his wife and 2 daughters, whose photo he showed me. If he had remained, the Gestapo may have taken him, but they would conceivably have left his family alone. Now his loved ones would be taken as hostages in his stead, with probable results that were quite unspeakable. I offered him what words of comfort I could. Apparently my powers of persuasion were inadequate. 1/4 hour later, he stuck the muzzle of his rifle in his mouth and pulled the trigger. These were men, both the partisans and the escapers, that psychologically and physically were right on the edge. And what's more, they still had a huge distance to cover.
I wake up to find the weather has changed yet again, this time to snow. The escapees were hungry and ill-equipped and had no idea where they were going. And the partisans were taking them through the most rugged and inaccessible route possible to avoid capture. Today, I'm walking with a guide whose uncle was a partisan.
Hi, Herman.
Hello, Monty.
How are
Let's go. I'm good. And you?
I'm very good.
Very good.
Very good. Looking forward to a big day.
Yes.
Deep into the forest.
Yes, deep in the forest. It's very nice. See.
Good.
Herman Novak has spent his life working in these forests and is the perfect guide to the route the escapees took.
So, Herman, the snow makes me think we're in the mountains. We're properly in the mountains.
Yes.
And this is wild country.
Yes, wild country.
On the second day, the group was handed to a new band of partisans with an intimate knowledge of this particular terrain. But they kept the route deliberately secret in case anyone was captured and tortured into revealing their whereabouts.
The terrain's not easy to move over.
No.
No.
carefully.
Yeah.
Opa.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Good.
Yeah, good.
Bravo, bravo.
Made it. Herman's pushed on ahead a little bit. And that raises a couple of very interesting points. The first one is fitness. Herman's 60, but he's got that mountain fitness, that Slovenian fitness. And that's what the partisans had. They not only knew the mountains like the back of their hand, they also knew how to move through them and how to keep going, how to keep these prisoners going who weren't in anything like the same shape. And they also had any maps they needed were in here. And the story of the escape with this big group is that the group was handed over to different groups of partisans throughout the whole route who knew their area of ground intimately. And without Herman there, I'd be stuffed. I'd be bare breakfast. I'd be wandering around in the woods. But he is replicating exactly what the partisans did.
The partisans had developed a sophisticated communication system. Couriers as young as 12 travelled in pairs on foot, back and forth, through a network of secret corridors delivering messages to each of the rebel cells. Stenko Ruta was a coordinator on the corridors used by the escapees.
To so neke vrste tajne steze, bi rekli, tako bolj simbolično, ne? In mi, kurirji, smo tvegali s to skupino, ker so ostali sledovi. Če 100 ljudi hodi, veste, da se pozna, ne? In Nemci so imeli svoje obveščevalne službe.
However, the partisans were completely in tune with this environment, and their covert activities were helped by some unexpected friends.
In pa še to povem, da najboljši zavezniki naših skrivnosti so bile pa ptice, zlasti šoje. Če je bila nekje zaseda, so z tiste strani proti nam priletele šoje in veste, kako šoje hreščijo, ne?
Beautiful. Look at that.
Look, yes.
I've heard of these horses.
Look.
Yeah.
It's coming.
Wow.
Coming.
So they're Lipizzanis.
Lipizzanis.
The foals of this amazing breed are born black, but then their coats fade to this snow white.
Absolutely beautiful. They almost don't look real.
In Slovenia, is very
easy to train.
Yeah, easy for training.
Yeah, intelligent.
Intelligent, very intelligent. Yeah.
Yeah, people who likes that.
Yeah.
Really, that's the spot.
Kijk,
Horses play a very significant role in this escape, and it's a story that appears a little way further down the trail. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Beautiful beasts.
Beautiful horse.
As they trekked, the escapees managed to find water in the network of streams in the mountain. But food was much harder to come by.
Keeping this huge group, the prisoners and the partisans, supplied with food was a serious problem. And it ended up being a matter of trust. The partisans would approach local contacts that they knew could supply food. And it was a logistical miracle, actually, they managed to do it. But it also led to an act of betrayal. And a man was brought in by a local Slovene, and he was brought in with his hands tied behind his back because he had been caught poisoning some soup. And according to Ralph Church's account, Ralph persuaded them not to execute him. Because, of course, to be a traitor to the partisans was instant death. It was a decision that came to haunt them because he escaped. And they knew the moment he escaped, they were in a world of trouble because the first thing he was going to do was going to go and inform the Germans as to exactly where they were.
Now under direct threat of discovery, it was vital that the group pushed on.
We're in this huge open area now, which is wonderful, by the way. When you've been there, it's quite claustrophobic being in the forest, and then you open out, and it's these lovely sort of, almost, it's like a meadow, a glade, a clearing. But these were big problems for the escapers, and the partisans knew they had to avoid them because moaning overhead with German reconnaissance planes, the Germans were looking for them all the time. So something like this just would have been a death trap for them.
With this in mind, they made a significant decision: to eat and rest during the day and to walk under cover of night. After a tough day's trekking, Herman and I spot somewhere to stop and refuel.
Na zdravje.
Zdravje.
Na zdravje.
Zdravje.
Yeah.
Right, cheers, good health.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers.
The Slovenian partisans were fighting for their homeland and their identity. And Herman is keen to show me that their love of good food and homemade spirits is very much part of their culture.
And I can see.
Good food. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a great scene here, really, because a bit of music in the background, a few people around, the evening's just gathering momentum. And the escapers talked about this. They talked about the hospitality they received and the way that everywhere they went, people gave them things, and people who had nothing gave them things. So it's really lovely to experience some proper Slovenian hospitality.
Is that wrong?
A broken Herman.
I get the feeling Herman's not actually used to drinking.
He's had enough. He's had enough. That's not at all. Okay,
Opa! Bravo!
Very nice.
The escapees continued their trek at night. This afforded them some protection from the German patrols, but even the darkness couldn't guarantee their safety.
After several uneventful days, the group was moving one night and they reached a partisan staging post, and the partisan flashed their torches. That was the signal. We got no response. So they flashed them again, and then from the darkness, a voice went, "Verda!" unmistakably German. And instantly the whole group hit the ground. And the lead partisan bellowed into the darkness, "Partisan!" And then immediately, from the left and from the right, machine guns opened up and all hell broke loose.
They'd walked straight into the enemy. I'm retracing the route of the most audacious escape of Allied prisoners of the entire Second World War. By the fourth night, the group was 7 miles south of the German-occupied town of Slovene Gradec. They're approaching a farmhouse normally loyal to the partisans when, in the darkness, they walked straight into an enemy outpost.
Got to imagine this. It's pitch black. You've got a group of exhausted escapees and suddenly you're under fire. These are men who haven't been under fire for years, and all of their training and all their infantry culture just went out the window. They just scattered into the woods. And the partisan leader used a very clever trick. In the chaos of the night, he would shout, "Partisan 1, advance! Partisan 2, advance! Partisan 3, advance!" Always giving the impression that they were winning the battle, getting ever closer to the farmhouse, when in fact they were sitting tight, just firing their weapons. And that's a great way to fool an enemy who's very frightened themselves and holed up in there. And the battle raged around them as the escapees scattered. And then gradually the gunfire started to slow, and then it ceased. And then the partisans found a gully, and they used that gully to sneak around the back of the farmhouse and then carry on.
Sadly, there was one death in the ambush, and it was a significant one. It was one of the lead partisans.
when they'd finally gathered all the escapers together, they found that there were 6 missing. They'd just been lost in the darkness of the woods. But they couldn't wait, they couldn't look for them, they had to keep going.
Their only hope was that they would find the men further down the line. But what happened here demonstrates how close they were to catastrophe. They were living on a knife edge, with the threat of capture by the Nazis ever present. But the people that helped them were also in danger. The farming families who lived in remote places like this provided a lifeline. The partisans relied heavily on the support of local civilians for shelter and food. Josje Kimovec recalls the help offered by his parents.
Naša domačija je bila med vojno zelo pomembna, ker je bila to res partizanska družina. Kar se zadeva pomoči, tukaj ni bilo zdaj vprašanje kaj. Vse, od hrane, pijače, tudi prenočišče, kakšna skrivnost in še ostalo. Zato pa je bilo zelo tvegano med tem časom.
German reprisals were swift and brutal. The memory of one incident is still painful for Mirko Kaplija.
Požgali 11 domačij, uničili njih, so žgali 15 domačinov. Mamo, Pintarjevo mamo, ki je videla, da prihajajo sovražniki, Nemci. Včeraj so se umaknile v gozd, mama pa ni hotela. Rekla je, kar bo, pa bo. Ja. Zgodilo se je to, takrat se je začel ta pohod. Požgali so domačijo in nej zažgali tudi mater. Naslednji dan so jo iskali in zbrskali so iz tistega papira njene kosti.
Ralph and the escapees were acutely aware of the sacrifices ordinary people were making to help them.
Much of this route takes place through dense forest, and it's hard work. And of course, we're not being pursued by a relentless enemy.
These remarkable photographs record the escapees as they pushed on in single file. But the advantage of local partisan knowledge continued to keep them safe.
This was the great weapon that the partisans had. They knew this land like the back of their hands, and they knew the trails through it. And they knew that their pursuers, the Germans, would get lost here, and so wouldn't really venture into these woods. It's very, very easy to get lost indeed, as Herman's demonstrated. We're temporarily navigationally distressed. Let's put it like that. I wouldn't describe us as lost. Herman, would you say we're lost?
No, we're not lost, but which way is the real way?
Yeah. Look. It's hard, isn't it, Herman?
It's
confusing.
Hard. Confusing.
If this camera's found in 5 years, please remember me and Herman.
We recover our bearings and arrive at the point the escapees reached after 8 days. They were almost halfway across the country, and now the landscape was changing, which presented new issues.
And we've just come out of the woods, which is always a nice feeling because you open up these huge views down the valleys. There's a farmhouse in front of us here. And dogs are a big problem for any escaping prisoner because of what you can hear now. And they give away your presence, of course.
This was a tough point for Ralph and the group. One of the partisans had been killed, 6 escapees were still missing, and they were exhausted. But they couldn't relax their guard because this area was strategically important to the Germans and heavily occupied. And what's more, a final hurdle lay between them and freedom.
Like the group, there's a major obstacle ahead of me. And this presented a huge, huge challenge, both logistically and in terms of their security. And it was only a few miles ahead.
The mighty Sava River. This artery scythes through the north and south of Slovenia. But it was heavily patrolled and guarded. Getting nearly 100 people across seemed impossible.
So here we have it, Herman. Yeah. This is the mighty Sava River. Of course, this was wartime, and this was a major frontier point. So the Germans had sentry posts and watchtowers every 3 kilometers along this river. And somehow the partisans had to find one of those 3 kilometer stretches where they could get the entire group across. They were never going to be more than 1,500 meters away from a German sentry position. So what they needed was a combination. It was a combination of a genius plan and total cooperation from the local community. And that was the only way this was going to succeed.
If the river was an obstacle to the group, it also presents something of a watershed in my relationship with Herman.
It's a good representation, I think, Herman, because they went across in rowing boats. Don't you need to be in the front, Herman? Yes. And I need to be here. So I thought bags in the middle, you here, and me there. Yeah. This was a noisy business. And the escapees were really excited about it across in the river. And Ralph had to speak to them, say, everyone calm down and shut up. Yeah,
I go first.
You go first? Okay, yeah.
No, you.
Because otherwise, we will definitely be found. Hop in, Herman.
I have a feeling this might take us some time.
Right, into the current. Okay, Herman.
Only for it.
Go on, paddle, Herman. Paddle. You think that spot there, Herman? He's not talking to me anymore. Wonderful.
We go there, there.
Spot on.
There. Hajde, Monty. Gremo. Hajde, pazi.
So if 2 people are having this much trouble, it does beg a question.
So how'd you do it? How'd you get 100 men across this river under the noses of the Germans in the dead of night?
I'm following the trail of the largest escape of Allied prisoners during the Second World War. In the hands of the partisans, Ralph Church's and nearly 100 Allied POWs have trekked through territory that was swarming with German patrols. But now they face their biggest obstacle so far. How could they get all the escapees across the Sava River with the enemy all around? They would rely on the coordinated effort of the entire community. Jože Godec lived by the Sava and joined the resistance aged 13. He had a crucial role during the river crossings. This signal meant the coast was clear.
They had 6 men to a boat, and they got local oarsmen to paddle them across. And Ralph Churches talks about the Olympian effort that took. But whilst that was happening, they got local people to drive horses across the river.
It was now early September. Harvesting was underway and horses were regularly moved by farmers from the north of the river to work in the fields on the other side. The Germans were used to this happening at night, and luckily it was a noisy process that would mask the escape. This caused a major distraction. In addition, they had another clever tactic. The partisans sent fighting parties upriver and downriver to attack German outposts to keep their focus elsewhere.
What a moment of theatre. This all happened in the dead of night. And this huge group of men were spirited across this river on muffled oars. And you could hear the distant snorting and splashing of horses. And even quieter in the distance, the crackle of gunfire. The Germans were absolutely oblivious as to what was going on right under their noses.
What do you think, just here? Yeah.
It was an almighty effort, although maybe it's just as well they weren't relying on me and Herman that night.
Bravo. Oh, no.
There we go, yeah. Brits are terrible at things like that, terrible at handshakes. Well done. Conquered the mighty Sava.
As they entered Bila Krajina, in the southeast region of Slovenia, the news they were waiting for finally came. After 14 days, they had found out their destination. Just 10 miles away was the partisan town of Semic, with an Allied HQ. But the incredible strain of the last 2 weeks overtook them, and they simply ground to a halt. Utterly exhausted, they collapsed on the side of the road.
Ralph responded to this drop in morale to the fact that the march had almost ground to a halt by giving them a stirring speech, and it was quintessentially Australian in its delivery. I've got a copy of some of the lines here. He said to them, "You bloody heroes, you've made history. We've done more than 150 miles in 14 days. We're not going to jib at the last 10, are we? I'm buggered too, but I'm going to make it." That speech was enough to get them up and get them moving.
Herman and I are approaching the final destination of Semic.
We were just walking. This is the junction to Semic. Semic is just up there. And this very kind couple here just saw me and Herman walking past. We got talking. Yeah, the Jägermeister came out.
Come, Monty.
Okay, well,
This
thank
is
you. Voilà.
Jägermeister.
Jägermeister.
Very special drink.
That's like a pint.
Okay.
Right, Herman has to have one as well.
Okay. Na zdravje.
Na zdravje. Na zdravje.
Na zdravje, gospod.
Cheers. You have to do the whole bottle. Cheers. Good hell. Down the hatch.
Another classic display of Slovenian hospitality. Strangers helping a couple of weary travellers.
Splendid. Very good. Voilà. Thank you very much. Wonderful. Wonderful.
And after that welcome break, we've made it. Like Ralph and the escapees, we are finally walking into Semic.
What a moment that must have been for the prisoners.
They must be happy, huh?
Yeah. Footsore, weary, but happy.
Yes, I think so.
This is Semic. This is Journey's End. And this is where the escapers finally knew it was over.
This remarkable photograph captures the very moment the escapees marched into Semic that day. Their incredible journey had taken them 15 days, covering an arduous 160 miles through grueling Nazi-occupied territory. And while at Semic, the escapees received tremendous news. The POWs lost during the firefight had been found. They were all reunited and they were all going home.
By 1945, the Allies were supplying the partisans from 10 secret airfields based around Slovenia, using aircraft like this Dakota. And it was from here, this very airfield, that the group finally made their escape. And what a moment that must have been, to hear the distant drone of the engines, to look up and see the Dakotas coming in, and to know that this escape had finally come to an end.
Ralph's great escape became known as the Crow's Flight. Before he left, an officer had remarked, "You've made it in good shape. It's only 100 miles as the crow flies. Why aren't more of our chaps doing it? To which he replied, maybe it's because they're not bloody crows, sir. I can't leave Slovenia without visiting the monument at Dražgoži. Built in 1976, it honours the partisan movement and stands as a potent symbol for everything they represented.
This landscape is wild and beautiful and untamed. And for me, that epitomises the qualities of the partisans. They were born of this landscape. And when the Germans rolled in, they were immovable and they were defiant. I think Ralph and his mates found the perfect group of people to help them with this audacious escape bid. And where I'm standing now is a powerful symbol of the courage and of the tenacity required by everyone involved to pull off one of the greatest escape stories of the whole Second World War.
Zelo sem zadovoljen, ki je ta skupina, ki to snema in da bomo, ajde, čez ne vem koliko časa, če bojo zanamci videli, kaj se je dogajalo.